Hey Tori, the purpose of this video is to talk through my notes. Hopefully, if you haven't already done so, you'll take a moment at this point to reopen the job description Word document that I have sent back to you as attached to this grading screen. For anything future, eliminate what you sent me and go with this as the starting point. You may even save this under the same file so that you've got this version instead of that version. The PDF file you might want to print out because I'm going to reference that in this video. You can kind of follow along on paper while you're listening to me talk. Overview, really good job on this job description. It's obvious that you've talked with some folks to get an idea of what to do because the things that they probably do on a regular basis in their job descriptions, you've handled really well. You indicated in your response that the job context was a little bit unfamiliar, and it may be that they don't do that in your HR department. And it's probably not part of normal job descriptions, but I wanted you to think through that because as an HR representative, you're going to need to understand the context of the job, not just what it does, but the setting and so forth, to be able to interview folks for this job because you understand it and to be able to answer their questions. So hopefully in just a matter of a few minutes here, I'm going to go through the highlights of your job description here. The job summary is great. It's intended to give them in 3 or 4 sentences maybe what it is that this job does so that they can decide whether to keep reading or not. You've done that really well. Essential functions, as you think about the accounts payable, you've hit all of the main things that you would do as you're paying the bills. You've distinguished this from receiving money and focused on getting rid of money, and that's good. I just made a couple of changes to some cosmetic kinds of things. But for all of these things, stepping back to the job summary, you may not have to make any changes, but I encourage you to read through it again and think about it one more time from the standpoint of the person applying for the job. Is there anything that you might tweak in terms of wording or phrasing so that it's crystal clear to them what you need? In the essential functions, end of month I think is hyphenated. I noted that here, but I didn't change it in the file that I sent you. I would suggest that you say open mail daily and do what? Distinguish this from somebody like an administrative assistant who might also open mail daily. Your role as an accounts payable is to do something with that mail once you get it. So specify what it is that you do. Do you make decisions about who to give it to? Do you prioritize in terms of what you pay when? Those kinds of things. I added a generic other duties as responsible, but the functions you've done a great job on. And I'm proud of you for the way that you've thought through this thing and phrased it well. The job context, as I said, is the environment that you're working in is probably not part of the normal job description, but I want you to think about this job from an HR perspective to be able to get into the mind of the person who's applying and help them out as much as possible. It answers some basic questions that they would have. I want you to rework supervision received. The question that answers is, who do I report to? Who's my boss? If I look at an organizational chart, what title is in the box right above mine? So what you're going to say here is that this position reports to that title. And then you want to indicate very briefly, is that person in this location? If I've got questions, do I walk across the hall, walk across the building, or is that person somewhere else and I'm going to need to contact them by phone? Because it's going to be a major question that I have as a new employee. Who do I report to and how do I find them when I have questions? That's what that is intended to do. Under available guidelines, the question that we're answering is, not everything needs to go to my boss. There ought to be resources available that I can turn to when I have questions. So the answer that you're trying to get here is, where do I look when I have questions? And I want you to rephrase all of this to really focus on what manuals are available, what websites do we point you to, what policies and procedures and things like that, what physical things can I go to so that I don't have to bother my boss every time I have a question. In a couple of sentences, kind of lay out the resources that we have available. And you might have to make some of this thing up, but think logically from the accounts payable. Reference the accounting online kinds of things that they can reference and what they might have in their cubicle or in their office, in the cabinet, up on the shelf. What are we going to give you to make this job easier? Accountability, consequence of error, you've done pretty well. Basically, what might go wrong? We could make a bad decision as to who to pay when. We could default on some terms. We could incur penalties. The accountabilities would be paying things on time and maintaining good relationships with people and managing cash flow and things like that. What are the consequences? We could get a bad reputation with our vendors. They could quit doing business with us. We could spend too much at one time and not manage our cash flow and have problems making payroll. I mean, those are worst case scenario kinds of things, but they are consequences. And this helps to identify to the candidate, what is the problem if I make a mistake? What are the typical mistakes that I could make, and what happens if something goes wrong? Does the company close down? Do I get fired? Those kinds of things. Basic kinds of things here. Personal contacts. I want to have the answer to the question, do I deal with other people? If so, who and how often? You've identified the controller and employees, but you also are certainly going to interact with vendors, customers, maybe if you have to give refunds to people. Think a little bit broader here in terms of all of the kinds of people that you'd have to interact with. And how frequently will you do it? How often do I interact with the controller? Only when I'm in trouble, once a month, whatever. Employees, probably daily. Vendors, probably daily. There are certainly more people than just the controller and the employees that I'm going to have to interact with as an accounts payable clerk. So not only who, but how frequently. All right, physical demands. You've talked about conversations, computer skills, accounting knowledge, minimal standing, walking, lifting. You would probably want to be a little bit more specific in terms of lifting how much. Less than 10 pounds, very infrequently, once a week, whatever. Physical demands you've done okay on, just a little bit more specifics and you're probably good. Work hazards, it's a no-brainer that we're going to comply with OSHA. But finish this thought. What kinds of hazards are there? Could I have carpal tunnel? Is there a lot of typing that could cause a problem that's a hazard? Is there loud noises? Do people yell at me frequently? Could I have vision problems from staring at a screen? Those are probably very infrequent, very minimal, but you want to kind of give them an idea of the context of this. What hazards are there? There are no major hazards typically in this job, but here's some minor things that we try to manage to reduce on you. Personal demands, I want you to rewrite that, because the question that this is answering, and I think I talked about most of this in the overview video that I did. But the personal demands answers the questions, how does this impact me away from here? Do I have to work overtime? Do I have to work weekends or holidays? Is there travel involved? Is it overnight? Those kinds of things. What demands are there going to be on me personally in terms of my time and my abilities, all right? Knowledge, skills, abilities you've done pretty well on. In order to do an accounts payable clerk job, what knowledge do I have to have? You've talked about principles of accounting and administrative kinds of things. What skills do I need to be able to do? Sometimes I've got to be able to sweet talk our vendors to get extensions on payments. So personal kinds of things, strong social skills you've talked about. What abilities do I have to have? Balancing checkbooks or prioritizing demands on our organization in terms of when we pay and so forth like that. But pretty good overall. Minimum qualifications, I would reword that. High school diploma or GED, because some people will have the GED, is required. You've kind of talked about it a little bit. Maybe just reword a little bit in how you went about phrasing that. The experience, 2 to 3 years of accounting type work, is that required or is that preferred? In the real world, you would want somebody with some experience, but this is a clerk's position, so it could be entry level. You've got college type of experience, but no real world experience. Will we train you? Is this, the main question that I would ask as I'm reading this is this required? Because if it is, I can't apply for this job. Is it preferred? I can illustrate that I'm able to do it even though I don't have experience. So think about that. Otherwise, pretty good job on this thing. Some minor tweaks, rewording or rewriting certain sections will make it very, very clear to an applicant whether this is something they're interested in and are capable of doing. And again, the more you do these kinds of things and think about these kinds of questions, the more you understand the job as an HR person and can do a really effective interview to find out if this candidate really is the person that we need in this job. So keep it up. Good job. If you have questions, email me or call me. But any changes that you make, go to that doc file that I've attached to this feedback screen and start with that. When you get that back to me, I might make some tweaks, but I don't anticipate that you're going to need to do anything else once you've made these changes, and I'll load it to our website. Thanks.